Hi, I'm Vicki Hoff from Handi Quilter,
and I'm Cheryl Duncan from Handi Quilter.
And welcome to the Tension Tug-of-War. So the first thing we want to talk about today with tension is the needle. Do you think you need a good needle to get good tension? You do. So let's first talk about the needle. So Cheryl, I'm going to hold this needle up here, and you talk about the characteristics of this needle.
Well, I want to see the sewing machine that thing fits.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Okay, so the first thing that we have is we have the eye of the needle. This is where your thread goes. If you can't get it in there, you've got problems.
So if you can't get it in there, that means your eye of your needle is not large enough. That means your needle is not large enough. So you need to match up the thread size with a needle size, all right? Okay?
That's right. Then you have the long groove here, and this has to go right down the front.
And the reason for that long groove is that's where the thread rides. Again, if the needle is not large enough, the thread will ride on the outside of that, and it causes shredding. So, and that's an ugly thing to happen, okay?
Okay, then we have the shank. If you notice, the shank on the quilting machines are round. Kind of hard to keep it in straight.
Well, so on my regular domestic machine, it's got that flat spot. So you put it in, you know it's there.
That's right.
But the nice thing about the round is that you can adjust that. So if I'm having some shredding issues, let's put this needle back up. If I'm having some shredding issues, that might be that my needle's not in properly, and you want to put that in at 6 o'clock. And shredding, it means that maybe the thread is hitting the hook too soon. So you might want to rotate that needle to 5:30. So as I take this needle here and rotate it slightly, just slightly to 5:30, as the loop forms in the back, it's forming a little bit away from that hook. So that can help eliminate shredding.
So you've really just changed your timing on your
just
machine.
Just a little bit,
just
yeah.
Slightly.
So our quilters can do that. So what about if it's having skipped stitches?
Well, I would think that you would want to go the opposite way and go towards 6:30.
Towards the hook, right?
Right.
It's not, the hook's not catching it.
Right.
So as I rotate this, if it's at 6, I rotate this to 6:30. So it's slightly to 6:30. That puts that loop in the back closer to the hook.
And it is just little tiny rotations. It's
tiny.
not
Now,
big.
if there is a timing issue, you may have to have your retailer help you with it. But this is, you know, some threads are just a little bit finicky, and they need just a little bit of a tweak. And so those are things that we can do. All right? So, needles.
One more thing on the needle.
Oh, what's that?
We have the scarf in the back.
That's right. Actually, there's another thing you didn't, but we'll talk about that too. So I'm going to turn this so you can see that scarf. What is that for?
That's actually where your hook passes by to catch the thread. And if that's not in backwards,
or if it is in
if
backwards.
it's in backwards and this is towards the front, there's nowhere for that hook to pass by.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get a stitch.
Doesn't catch the thread.
Yeah.
So the other thing is the point.
Okay.
Okay, so there are different points on needles, and if you have a domestic machine and you have a sharp point, you wouldn't want to use that on like knit fabrics.
Yeah.
And so there are ballpoint needles and there are sharp needles. We at Handi Quilter have what we call the R, and that is the sharp needle. Then we have an FG, which gives it a little bit of a ball if you want to use for knits. Okay?
So t-shirt quilt.
Yeah, absolutely, t-shirt quilt. So we have all of our different needles here from size 20 down to size 12. We also have infinity needles, and the infinity needles are a little different. They're what we call a crank needle. So rather than having it cut out, the needle is actually bent a little bit so that it just gives a, you know, when you cut something out, it maybe takes away some strength. But when you bend it, you still have that strength. So that's one of the reasons for the infinity needle, okay? And are we done with our needles?
I think the needles are done.
All right.
Just make sure you've got the right size for the thread
do you
that
know
you're
what?
using.
We are not done with our needles.
Okay.
You always want to use the right needle system for your quilting machine, and our needle system is system 134, and you can see that on the needle packages that you'll buy from your retailer. So that's the last thing I wanted to say on this. All right?
Makes a lot of difference to use the right needle.
It really does. Now it's time to talk about bobbin winding and the bobbins. So, first of all, we've got 2 bobbin winders here. This is one of the older bobbin winders. This is the new one that comes with the machines today. Both of these have speed control on them. Now, if you have an older bobbin winder that doesn't have speed control, then I would be really careful as you're winding those bobbins. You don't want to wind them at that fast speed because it can do ugly things, can't it?
Yes, especially on delicate threads.
That's right. I was winding a 60 weight thread the other day, and I was winding it on this bobbin winder, and I had it down to 3, which I thought, you know, it goes up to
9,
10. So I had it down to 3 thinking, yeah, that's good. Well, when I took that off, it had actually, because even that was too fast, and it had taken the sidewalls, which they're just kind of straight, flat like that, and it had just boing, and it had totally ruined my bobbin because then it made the bobbin too wide to fit in the bobbin case. So I couldn't even use it. So I just rewound it on another one a lot slower.
Oh, so you didn't throw the thread away?
No, I just rewound it.
Okay, good.
Okay, so the finer threads, definitely slow down your bobbin winder so that you have better control because it can tend to even stretch them.
Sometimes do you need to change your tension a little bit too?
You may want to, but we have to be careful with that changing the tension because I want to hold up this. You hold up yours, and I want to hold up these 2 bobbins. Put that up there by mine. And you can see how no tension, how dreadlock look that looks, terrible. And this is not going to give you a good stitch. This is really bad. So what we want it to look like is, let's pull up that one, and I'm actually going to pull up this one too. This is a good wound bobbin. And so if I try to put my fingernail down into that, it won't go in. If I do it here, I can sink right down in there. That's pretty ugly.
So if you can sink your fingernail in there, then as that thread is pulling off, it's going to sink down in there too, so it's not going to pull out smoothly.
Inconsistent tension. So another thing I want to show you is this is just about the right amount of thread that you want on your bobbin. I wound one a little fuller, and it's so full that it almost rubs against the bobbin case as you put it in. That right there is going to create a tension issue. So if you wind it too full, then just pull off a few yards because this is what you want. This is not what you want.
So you actually want to see just a little tiny bit of the bobbin.
And you can adjust both of your bobbin winders so you can get that. And you can find those instructions on our website, on your bobbin winder instructions, so you can find out how to adjust that, the feel of that. Yeah. And you want that bobbin thread to wind evenly back and forth as you're winding the bobbin, okay? And we can also use pre-wound bobbins. You know,
they work great.
Some manufacturers say that you might want to pull a few yards of this off before you start, you know, put it in your bobbin.
I've noticed sometimes I have to, but a lot of times I don't.
Yeah. So, you know, if you're having issues with that, you know, pull a little bit off, but a good wound bobbin is what we're looking for. The next thing we want to talk about is the bobbin case.
Kind of an important part.
A really important part. All right, so that bobbin case, first off, I want to just kind of get rid of a myth. There is no factory setting on the bobbin case. So it doesn't come, the machine doesn't come to you with a factory setting. The bobbin case comes to you on your machine with the thread tensioned with the thread that they use to sew it off on at the factory at Handi Quilter. So when it comes to you and you are using a 40 weight thread, we use a 50 weight thread here to sew it off, so you will need to make an adjustment. That's the nice thing, that we get to make adjustments on our bobbin case so that we can use all different threads.
Yes.
So like threads, you know, monofilament thread, if you want to put in your bobbin. I never put monofilament in my bobbin case, but some people do, but I never do. A fine thread, like a 60 weight thread, which is a nice bottom line thread.
Yeah.
That's the name of the thread, by the way, bottom line. But there's also 100 weight threads, silk threads. So fine threads, or I want to use a really heavy thread because I want that thread to really show on the back of the quilt as well as on the front. So those are the reasons, you know, and you can do that because we're going to teach you today how to adjust your bobbin tension. And you want to test that and check that every time you change your bobbin.
Even with the same thread?
Even with, oh, let me show you something. Even with the same thread. So I went around, we have 21 or 2 machines in our studio. So I went around, we just had a retreat and retailer training, went around and found some bobbins that had bobbin cases that had been used a lot and had been using a linty thread. So I'm going to pick this up, and first off, I'm going to just show you right here. What did you call that?
It looks like your little pink bunnies in there.
Yeah, a little dust bunny there.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's in there. So we definitely need to clean that out, and you can use your lint brush and see how that just cleaned right out of there. That's a lot of lint.
That is.
Would that make a difference in tension?
I would think so.
I would think so too. All right, because that much lint was there, I want to look under here. Right under this tension spring, there's this little pink ball. And what it has done is actually raised up the tension spring right there. Okay? So there's no tension.
No.
So that's why you always want to check every time that you change your bobbin and put a new bobbin in. You want to check there, under there, check inside to make sure that there hasn't been a lot of lint. So your cotton threads a lot of times will have that lint build up, and you just have to check them more often. So to get rid of that, there's a couple of ways to get rid of that lint. I can take a pin, so just a little pin, and I could slide it under there. But actually the thing I like to do is, you know your quilt magazines? They always come with these cards. This is just the right weight. I can slide that under there and watch. You see that pop out of there? Ooh, that was a big one.
That was a big one.
See how that popped out? No damage to the bobbin case.
Well, and it doesn't move the positioning of your hook either.
That's right. See, and there it is. It actually just fell right back down in now. So if Cheryl mentioned about moving the position of your hook, so I'm going to actually move this and see if you can get that on film. It's a little hard to do. It lifts up. If it is up outside of that groove and on the outside here, then there's no tension either.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that's just right down inside there. Now, let's put a bobbin in and let's see what our tension looks like here.
Okay.
So we put it in so that the bobbin, as we pull this out, turns clockwise, and you can see how that turns. It's turning clockwise. Okay. Underneath that tension spring, so let's do this again. One more time. Place that in so that it goes around in there, and then bring that up through that groove and underneath the tension spring.
So as you're holding that bobbin in front of you, it actually comes around the top and down the right side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it will pull out clockwise.
And then it pulls out clockwise, so you can see as it pulls. So that's the proper way to put it in.
Okay.
Okay, let's break that off. Now it's time to tension.
Okay.
And let's see. So what you want to do is you want to lay this in your hand. And if you're left-handed, then lay it in your right hand. If you're right-handed like I am, I'm putting it in my left hand. I'm going to pull out the thread, and I want it to lift off, up, stand up in my hand.
I think you got a problem.
I think I have a problem. Okay,
Yeah.
so it needs to be tensioned tighter, right?
Yes.
All right, so this screw, there's 2 screws there. It not this one, but this one with the ring around it is the one that I'm going to be working with. And it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So, do I need to tighten it or loosen it?
I think you need to tighten it.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tighten that. And usually, this is just like a tick on a clock adjustment. This one may take more because it was pretty out of adjustment.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to tighten that. And I did it about a quarter turn on this one. And it stands up, but it's not enough. So just a couple more turns. And for most machines, you know, that I might tighten it just. I think it needs still just a little bit more. Yeah. So that was really out of adjustment. Okay, tighten. Still, see, it's okay to keep tightening that.
So what's going to happen if you tighten that too much?
Well, if the lint was still in there and I think, oh, that's got no tension, and I just keep tightening it, what can happen is this tension spring right here is curved. It curves around the bobbin case, and if I tighten that screw too much, it can actually cause that tension spring.
So it's going to come up like this.
Yes, stand straight up, and then it's like, why isn't this working? So you need to then loosen it back, take your lint out, loosen it back up, and then it'll kind of slide back down. So we still have some, ooh, that felt so good. Stand up, oh, that is perfect, perfect tension. So what happens if it's, let's see what you've got here.
Okay, I'm pretty sure it's good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, over here, bring it to the center. You're pretty sure, huh?
Maybe not.
No, not. No.
So it's not dropping it at all.
So it's too tight, isn't it?
So it's too tight, yeah. So
so
now
we
I've
need
got to loosen it.
that. And how much are you going to loosen that?
I'm just going to do a little bit because it really actually...
when you say a little bit...
Like a tick of a second on a clock.
Okay.
Because it would drop if I wiggled it just a little bit.
But
I don't want to wiggle it.
No wiggling.
But I don't think there's that much...
Okay, so... Oh.
Haha, how about that first time?
All right, let's see this other one. I've got another one here. Let's see how this works. Stands up and perfect.
I think
perfect
she used
tension.
the same one.
No, that was the one I was using. Perfect tension. Okay, so what happens is, this is a weight. The bobbin has a weight on it because the thread is the weight. So what if I used a partially wound bobbin? Does that give me the same weight?
Well, it wouldn't.
No, it wouldn't.
How can it?
That's right. And so there are tools that you can use to test this so that you can get that, you know, the Toa bobbin gauge tensioner you can use on partially wound bobbins so that you can get that pull, because that's what it needs, is that pull. Okay? And
or you can just play with it till you've got a good tension.
So let's talk about just play with it. This is the most important thing I want you to hear today, is the bobbin is the foundation of setting your tension. You set that bobbin first, and then when we go to the top with the machine in just a minute, when we go to the top, then it's a top thread issue. We know we set that bobbin correctly so that it lifts or stands up in our hand. We know we've set it no matter what weight thread. We set that so that that stands in our hand. Then we work with the top tension. So I think it's time maybe to move in a machine and talk about top tension.
I think so.
We're back with Marie, studio educator, okay? So now it's time to talk about all of the wonderful threads that we can use. Marie, you use a lot of different threads in your quilting, don't you?
A lot.
Like lightweight threads, fine threads, to heavier threads.
To heavier threads.
So Marie's is known at the studio to put 2 threads in to make it even bolder.
I do, and I like it.
And you don't change a needle.
And I don't change my needle, and really you don't have to change the tension very much.
Yeah, okay, but let's start back at the beginning with threads. So you have lots of threads, or at least I have lots of threads.
We have lots of
Right
threads.
up there with my fabric stash is my thread stash.
Yes.
Yes, and so I have lots of different threads for different needs. So I want my fabric to show texture without showing thread color. What thread do you use?
I like the lightweight, like 100 weight or 100 weight, or the monopoly.
The 100 weight or an 80 weight.
Or an 80 weight, yeah.
Or even a 60 weight bottom line can do that.
Yeah.
Or a monopoly, which is a thread you can't even see. See, you can't even see it. That's how fine that is.
Yeah.
And so those finer threads break easier.
Right.
So the tug-of-war.
So you have to adjust your tension for a lightweight thread. So a lightweight thread has light tension.
That's right. So a heavyweight thread, you can have a little heavier tension. It will accommodate that.
It needs a heavier tension.
Yeah, to pull it up and to make that perfect stitch, because that's exactly what we're looking for, is that perfect stitch where the bobbin thread goes up into the fabric, the top thread goes down into the fabric, they lock inside of the fabric, and we have a chart for you on our PowerPoint that you can print off so you can see this. But they have to lock inside of the fabric, not sit on top or sit on the bottom of your fabric, so that that creates that tight locked stitch, that pretty stitch.
Yeah.
Really
so it
nice.
looks really nice.
And that's called a balance stitch. Now, I can balance it.
And you can have the top tight and the bottom tight.
And it's balanced and it looks pretty, but my thread keeps breaking. Why?
Yeah. Too tight. Both
On
too
both.
tight. Yeah.
So
both too tight.
go back to the beginning, the foundation, set that bobbin tension correctly so that it'll stand up in your hand, and maybe it'll lift just a little bit, but without jiggling or anything, it will slide back into your hand. I really now am doing it so that as I lift it up, it stands up, and that's about it. It'll stand up good and strong, but it won't necessarily lift off. And I use the Fusion, and it works great.
And I
Such an
still
easy-
like to see how it drops. I want to know that it's.
But you drop your hand with it, don't
But
you?
I
So it
yes,
slides.
yeah. So it glides down
Yeah.
that thread
But
into
so
my hand.
tight tension will break the thread.
Right. And sometimes you can have your tension set right, but with those lightweight or delicate threads, you just push out really fast. You start really fast, and that jerk will break your thread as well.
That's right.
So delicate thread.
So the other thing, I've got a whole bunch of threads here, a lot of different types of threads. We've talked about the monofilament. We've got a 60 weight here. We've got silk, 100 silk. Beautiful thread, beautiful thread. But it's really, really fine. Okay, so, and it breaks really easy.
Right. So that's one of those you want to, you know that starting out. So treat
So
it
I'm just
gently.
kind of putting
treat
those
it delicately.
threads along there. Those are our delicate threads.
Okay.
Okay, and another thread is a glitter thread. This is a thread that is a flat thread, so it doesn't have a shred, but it stretches and it breaks really easy. So again, lighter tension. On this type of a thread, this is a thread that needs to come off of the thread post horizontal instead of vertical. If it comes off this way, it's like a roll of toilet paper, so it starts to twist. As it comes off this way, it rolls like a roll of toilet paper and just rolls smooth, and then it goes on the horizontal spool pin on the machine. And then I eliminate 2 of the thread guides, of the 3-hole thread guides, and put it only through one, because that's a thread guide, and then tension it as usual. Thread it as usual, flossed up into the tension disc, and then I will loosen that like 2 full turns. When I say 2 full turns, if my thumb is at the top, it has to go around to the top again.
Yep.
And then it has to go around to the top
Yep,
again,
yep.
maybe. Okay? And this is fun thread for, sparkle on a quilt. It's maybe not an heirloom thread, but it's a fun thread to use
Yeah,
for Christmas
yeah.
quilts, patriotic, fun quilts, okay? So those are your delicate threads. Then we go into metallic. Metallic can be delicate.
Can be.
Tricky or finicky.
Or it can be very easy.
And I don't have any issues
I don't have any trouble with it.
Because I know that it can't take as much tension as maybe a 40 weight king tut thread. So it has to have a lighter tension, and some people may want to put a larger eye or a larger needle, maybe go up to a size 18 needle for this.
So do you worry about that big needle making holes in your quilt?
When I take that quilt off, shake it out, and use it, I don't.
Yeah, right. It
I
just
don't.
goes away.
Yes, okay. So then there are threads that are shiny threads. These are called trilobal polyester threads, and see how nice and shiny that is
yeah.
compared to maybe this one's not quite so shiny.
Yeah.
You know, and those are really fun threads to use. These are like embroidery threads, but they're fun to use, and they make a beautiful stitch.
And they just add to the quilt. And those are ones that you use because you want attention to your thread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then there are threads that are, this is a polyester thread too, has a little bit more lint on it. This one is a black that's kind of a green, I guess, in that color. But great workhorse, this is an Omni thread from Superior. It's our great, I call it the great workhorse thread because it just does everything.
Yeah, it's great for an edge to edge, and that's a lot of what you use, but it works for everything.
It takes more tension. It'll accommodate a tighter tension. Okay. Then we have heavier threads. This is a 19 weight thread, which is a cotton, and so that's a harder thread. Obviously, this tug-of-war that we've got going on, it's going to take more to break that.
Right, and I think we talked about that you don't necessarily have to have a heavy thread in the bobbin just because you have this heavy thread on the top.
Okay, good point. So let's go back, let's go to this green thread. This is basically about a 40 weight thread. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to put this pre-wound bobbin in with it, which I am matching the color. And it's really, I feel very, very important to match the color so that you have a better stitch, because your quilting machine is a different machine. It's not like your domestic where you're just going in a straight line. Your quilting machine is moving from corner to,
Yep.
moving, and you have a chance of having a little bit of a pokey or a pull-up because of that motion and the deflection of the needle and those things. And so I always match up my thread color.
Good match.
So let's go back here then. What about this? What thread color would I choose? Because you've got some.
So you've got a lot of variety there. I don't like to use the monofilament in the bobbin because it stretches as it goes on, and I just as soon would use a color that kind of blends with all of those.
So maybe the yellow or the lighter orange.
Yeah.
That would go.
And I kind of look at my fabric too, and how's it going to blend with that, rather than, if it does come through, will it blend?
So how do you choose the bobbin color? Because customers will say, well, I have a black backing and I have a white top, so I'm going to put black thread, bobbin thread, and I'm going to use white thread on the top. And it's like, oh, for beginners, that's really a tricky, hard thing. Sometimes, if you've really worked with your threads in that and worked with your machine and you understand it a lot, you might be able to pull it off a little bit, slow your speed down, because those points in and out are going to be issues.
Right, right.
But my thinking is this. If you were to go to a quilt show and look at the back, if they allowed you to look at the back of the quilts, you would see that those that are award-winning quilters match up their backing thread with their top thread.
Yeah.
And they match it so that it complements the top. So it's like, well, wait, then what does it do for the back? It gives you a whole new look
right,
on the
a
back.
whole new quilt. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I think too, when we were hand quilters, we could only use one thread color, and it went to the top and underneath and to the top again. So you still get that same thread color.
Yeah.
So just to get a good stitch, I just really always recommend to use the same color, but like you said, not necessarily, you don't have to use the same weight.
Right, yeah. Okay. And I usually use a lighter weight bobbin.
In the bobbin.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't, yeah, I do that as well, okay? All right, so we've got a lot of different threads here. I've got this fun fabric on the machine. What I want to do is pull off all our threads, and we're gonna play with some threads and see good tension, bad tension, and how to fix it. So we're doing this today right here so you get it. Okay, we've threaded our machine for a 40 weight, 50 weight thread, just a kind of the middle line thread.
Okay.
And so we want that perfect stitch. And so as we look at this, does that look pretty nice?
Well, the top looks good. How's the bottom? So things I look for. Okay, so I look to see if there's definition between the stitch, and I kind of want to see that little tuft.
That's right, kind of sink down. So you're saying the top looks good, but as I look at this, and I'm going to just use this, look at that.
Ah, see, now that you mention that, I can see a little loose over here.
Yeah.
There you go.
So let's turn this over.
Yikes!
Yes. Okay, so let's look at this. Having set my bobbin tension, it's the foundation, having set my bobbin tension correctly first, and this is what I see, my top thread is being lazy. He is just not pulling his weight and pulling that thread up into the fabric. So he's lazy, and because this is what I'm seeing, those are all top thread issues. Here's my bobbin thread right there. He's just laying there because the top thread didn't pull him up inside.
Right. So we need to
tighten my top thread.
He needs to
him
pull
work
stronger.
Harder.
Yeah,
he needs to work harder. Okay, so just different threads. This looks good. Again, the same thing you said is you can see those definitions, but I see right here that my top thread is pulling the bobbin thread up. So he's being a bully.
So he's too tight, and
you need to loosen that.
And loose is towards you.
Loose
or
is
if you're on the
to the left, yes.
If you're on this side of the machine, it's lefty loosey, righty
tighty.
tighty.
So again, here's another one. This is just a variegated thread, and the stitches look good. And one thing that I have noticed is that these yellow, see how pretty those look?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you go over here to the blue and you kind of see a little bit of a zigzag or a little difference.
Like it pulls a little.
But right here even, it's just that contrast, that total contrast that you're seeing. See how pretty that looks? And right there, they're just kind of, and that's just the way, because the tension looks good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a difference in color. Okay, so I want to pull this over. Now, what do you see?
You are seeing lots of pokies, right?
So they're not those eyelashes that we saw in the green, but you're seeing a little pokey. And is my bobbin thread, is it sinking in or is it laying flat?
It's not sinking in at all.
So it's just laying flat. So our top thread again, even though it didn't do eyelashes, it still was not strong enough. He wasn't working hard enough. He needed more tension. Tighten him up.
Tighter.
Tighten him up. So, and you know, with this, we used a white bobbin thread and the multicolored here. I would have probably gone into a medium color, one of these colors, maybe even the yellow or a green that would have gone nicely with all of that. And then these dots, if you still see a little bit of them, it wouldn't be screaming in your face.
Right, so you really need to check both the back and the top.
Yeah, but this still, that bobbin tension is correct, but the top isn't doing its job. He's being lazy.
Right.
Okay. So if I were to see eyelashes on the top, and if this was the top of my thread, and I see eyelashes on the top, this means my top thread was being a bully, and he was working too hard pulling the bobbin thread up.
So you always know you make your adjustments to the top. Once you've set your bobbin correctly, then you make the adjustments on the top.
Okay, so let's get to our machine. This is called our hula skirt. We do this for our retreats, and they get to test all different threads on here and get the tensions correct. And as you look at some of these, some of them are pretty bad. You know, but
they go from bad to good.
And that's what we're going to do today. So we'll just throw that aside. We're going to bring our machine on, and I have the machine loaded with thread, matching thread, top and bobbin. Okay?
Okay, same color.
Same color, yes. Actually, same thread as well.
Okay.
For this. We're going to change out a little bit in a minute. But one of the things that I do when I walk up to my machine and after I've threaded it, I will grab a hold of my top thread with my left hand, and I will actually just hold this and pull. And I think, wow, that's really loose. Is it flossed? Flossed means, is it between those tension discs? Is it between there? Because if it isn't, there's no tension.
Right.
Okay. So it is flossed. But so why don't you go ahead and stitch a little bit here and let's see what happens, because it seems like it's a little loose.
All right, we'll just bring that bobbin thread up. And, oh yeah, that feels really loose. So
let's put you in regulated. And that's all you needed, as much as you needed to test that. So look at the loop.
Yeah, you can already see that. And you can feel how.
Oh yeah, I can really feel the roughness. So if we turn that over, you're seeing right there.
Yep.
Bad. So what's wrong?
Tighter. We need to tighten the top tension, right?
The top thread's being lazy.
Yeah, so we're gonna.
Let me clip your threads here so that you're, okay, so are you gonna turn it a click, or are you gonna do a half a turn or a full turn?
I'm pretty sure I can do at least a full turn.
Okay, so if your thumb is on the top, it has to go all the way around to the top again.
Right.
All right.
And then I can just kind of feel that again before I start, and I think
Did that feel better?
Still too loose.
Well, then maybe with what you know.
Let's just do another little half a turn.
So at 1.5 turns is what you feel right now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so let's just try this.
All right.
And I like to go over close to the edge so that I can just flip it and see. So
it's looking better. I'm still wondering if that's still laying flat. The bobbin is still laying flat.
Seeing how you can catch that thread with your fingernail?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can feel that it's not pulled up inside.
So the top looks nice, but it's still sinking down too far. So he's not working hard enough.
Yep.
So you can do how much this turn? A half a turn?
Half a turn. Let's try that. All right. And I like to check on a curve, like to make a like a curl so that I can see.
That still looks good.
Okay.
I think he could use a little more. He's feeling better. I'm not feeling that ridge that I did, but I think he could use another half a turn.
Wow, you're particular, aren't you? You're really fussy.
Are you going to turn it?
Oh, wait. Why don't I turn that? Okay, let's try that.
Let's come down here. So it's still looking really nice, right?
Yeah. The stitches are defined. It's kind of got that little tuck into the fabric.
Dimples.
Yeah.
All right, it's getting. That's looking better. I see the tucks in the back fabric now. See the tucks, individual tucks, and as it goes around. Okay, that looked pretty nice. I think now the challenge is to put on. This is what I want to feel. Okay, that feels pretty tight, but it's not tight enough that it's going to break that thread. So it's going to work. Let's now go to a very fine thread. So we've tightened this up to a heavier thread. Let's go to a very fine thread and see what we have to do to work with a fine thread.
All right.
Okay, we've threaded a really fine thread. 100 weight is Wonderfill Invisifill, which gives you nice texture. It just melts into the fabric, but it's 100 weight. It's really fine, and I could break it. So I haven't changed the tension since I threaded this for you, and I can't even pull it. So if I were to start stitching, it would break. Wouldn't
Just
you
like
think
that.
so?
Just like that. Yeah.
Because it's just way too tight.
Yeah.
So would you like to loosen that to what you think maybe you
What
need
I
to do?
think maybe, so I probably tightened it about 3 turns, so I'm going to undo it about 3. Oh, I can't hardly.
Okay, I want to
You try it.
stitch.
Okay.
Let's see what it feels like. It's still pretty tight.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it still could break, and that's the issue with these delicate threads. Let's see if we can get that bobbin thread come up here. And well, that bobbin thread is feeling really tight too, so that tells me there's something wrong with my bobbin. I can't even pull it. So
And it should just pull out easily.
And I've got
Yeah.
a pre-round with this one, and so that felt, I might have not had that. So with this, as loose as that is, that should have not had any issues. But maybe I didn't put it in right. I'm gonna go ahead and put that back in.
So you would know right off if your thread doesn't pull out easily, you better check.
Oh, see, that's much better.
Yeah, yeah,
there.
that's what it should do.
Yeah, that's what it should do. Okay, so there was an issue there. Now I'm going to go ahead and just stitch some loops and see what it looks like, and hopefully it won't break. Okay, so I've started stitching a little bit here, and it appears that it looks okay. With more delicate thread, I stitch a little slower. You know, I'm not going to just really stitch fast. And it's looking okay on the top. So I'm going to stitch a little faster, because if it broke, then I'd know that. So again, you don't need to do a lot, but I kind of I like the way that looks. That looks really pretty.
That looks pretty.
So what do you think the back side looks like?
I think it looks good. Let's see.
That looks good. I'm seeing defined stitches. So your 3 full turns to loosen that up.
Woohoo!
You did a great job. One thing
Good guess.
It looks really pretty on here. One thing I want to point out is on here, this is high with this blue that we use, very high contrast, so you really see it. As we stitch, and I'm going to move this machine over and stitch into here. As we stitch that, I stitched into the turquoise, and look how pretty that looks there. What a pretty stitch it makes with the matching thread.
Yeah.
And the perfect tension. And this perfect tension looks really good right there. And as it goes into here, it still looks really nice, and that thread almost picks up the color of the fabric. So that was 3 full turns to get a really fine thread to work, which is a 100-weight thread, the finest thread you can use other than monofilament, which would be the same thing, very lightweight tension. Yeah. Okay. Now, sometimes this thread, or slippery threads I call them, so like trilobal polyesters, sometimes I've had them, glide is a thread that sometimes I've had this happen, is it wants to pop out of the tension disc, just random pop out and back in. Just frustrating, and it flips a loop. So then you have this loop on the back. Or a loose tension at one time, and then it goes back and it's good tension. But you have to rip out the whole quilt, or that pass, because you've had that intermittent tension issue.
So Vicki has a cure.
So do you want to hand me that turquoise thread there? I tried this once because I was having this issue with my thread at home on my it was either glide, I think it was a glide that I was using, and I just was having that pop out every once in a while. And I thought, now how can I stop it from popping out? And I thought, well, if I wrapped it around that tension one more time, it can't go out. But by wrapping it, that adds tension. So then I had to loosen my tension.
On the top or the bottom?
On the top. It's only a top thread issue.
Yep.
So I had to loosen my top tension knob and back that off a little bit, and it was perfect. And it never did ever pop out again. So anytime I use those shiny threads like this, it's just beautiful to use on some quilts. But it just kind of gets just that little slippery. So that's one thing that I have found. We get calls from quilters all the time with that very issue, and when we tell them to do that, it solves it every time. So it's a good thing to do.
So every single place that your thread touches, it adds tension to it. So like if you go around that 2 times and you've added that tension,
Right
then you
here.
might change like how many holes you go through, or instead of going around, you can weave it through.
You know, one of our educators in the field recommended that the other day to someone, that to say, when you wrap it around, it does add tension. But if you weave it like on a very fine thread, if you weave it through those 3 holes, it will not add tension, but it will guide it. And that's what it is a thread guide.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's another thought that you could do if you're having tension issues.
Yeah. So the good thing is that we have all these threads that we can use. The hard thing is finding that perfect adjustment to get the beautiful stitch.
That's right. And every time you do test a thread, after you get that perfect adjustment, then my thinking is you pull that, you feel that, you get that feel in your mind of what is there, what that feels like. And then
It's
you
not
can just
such
walk
a challenge.
up to it
Right.
and say, oh, this is a fine thread. That's way too tight, or oh, that's too loose. It's gonna
Yeah.
make loops. Okay, now we have one more thing we want to show you, and then you get to start quilting. The next thing I want to show you is, or talk to you about, is last November 2014, all of our machines started coming out with a new feature, and it's called the Easy Set Tension. So what that is when you tighten your tension or loosen your tension, you will see a number on your screen, and this will give you a number, a tension number. So this thread that we've been using, the 100-weight thread, tensioned up at 345. Now, every machine will be different because you tension your bobbin just maybe a little differently, and each machine is its own. So it would be a different number. You can't compare with your friend and say, oh, I use Wonderfield thread and it's 345. Oh no, I use it and it's 245. You have to do it to your number, and then you write that down so that when you go back in and put that thread back in to use again, you can go right to that 345. You may have to tweak it a little bit, but it's there for you. So it just helps you to just dial right into a number for the threads that you're using. So this new feature came out in November of 2014. Well, what about all of the other quilters, me for one, that have a Fusion that's a couple of years old, that doesn't have that feature? Well, we have that feature for everyone now. You can add that easy set tension to every one of our machines, not the Infinity, because it has the easy touch tension, which is a different feature, but the easy set tension can be added to every one of our machines that don't have it today. So, good news, everyone can have that feature. Isn't that great?
Oh, everybody has, at least you know where you start, and then you can make an adjustment.
Yes, and so this add-on feature will be you'll replace your tension assembly, and you'll have a display that you'll attach to your handles that will display a number, and you'll be able to dial in your number for every thread you use. So it's a great feature, and tension is our friend. There is not an issue with it. We can make it work and have beautiful quilting.